The first human child I ever saw was covered in someone else's blood. Not her own, mind you. That would have been tragic, but predictable. No, little Maya Chen was splattered with the purple ichor of a Krillian shock trooper. And she was grinning like she had just discovered the universe's greatest joke. 6 years old, maybe 7 by their primitive counting methods. Standing in the cargo bay of the refugee vessel Last Hope while bodies cooled around her tiny feet. I should probably explain how I, Zeph Nil of the 3rd Observational Fleet, came to witness this particular slice of human insanity. You see, my kind, the Valethians, had been monitoring this sector for approximately 3 of their years, documenting what we assumed would be the final extinction of yet another violent species. Standard procedure, really. Catalog their last gasps, file the reports, move on to the next doomed civilization. Humans, we had determined, were particularly doomed. They had been fighting the Krillian Empire for what they called the better part of a decade. 10 years of brutal, grinding warfare that had reduced their blue-green world to a smoking ruin. 10 years of watching their military forces get systematically dismantled by an enemy that possessed superior technology, superior numbers, and superior tactical doctrine. The smart species surrender when faced with such odds. The wise species negotiate. The clever species run. Humans? They kept fighting and losing. Which brought us to this moment, watching their pathetic evacuation vessels limping through space like wounded animals, carrying the last remnants of their kind toward, well, nowhere in particular. The Krillian blockade had ensured there were precious few places left to run. The Last Hope was one of 17 ships in this particular convoy, all of them overcrowded, all of them breaking down, all of them carrying people who should have been dead weeks ago. Military doctrine suggested the Krillians should have simply vaporized the lot of them and saved everyone the trouble. Instead, they were playing with their food. The first attack came without warning, as these things usually do. One moment the convoy was limping through the asteroid field of the Tannhauser Gate. The next moment Krillian interceptors were swarming them like angry wasps. Energy beams sliced through the darkness, turning 3 of the smaller vessels into expanding clouds of superheated gas and screaming metal. Standard procedure for my kind would have been to observe, record, and maintain strict neutrality. We were scientists, not warriors. Our mandate was clear. Document. Do not interfere. But then I heard the human communications channels. Last Hope, this is convoy leader Captain Torres on the flagship Defiance. We are taking heavy fire. Repeat. We are taking heavy fire. All civilian vessels implement Scatter Protocol 7. Torres, this is Captain Liu on Last Hope. Our engines are at 40% capacity. We cannot maintain evasion patterns. Understood, Liu. We will buy you time. And then, without hesitation, without debate, without any of the careful cost-benefit analysis that any rational species would conduct, the Defiance broke formation and charged directly into the heart of the Krillian attack force. I watched through our long-range sensors as this single battered vessel carrying nearly 800 souls deliberately threw itself at a squadron of 12 enemy fighters. Not to escape, not to hide, to buy time for the others. The humans call this sacrifice. If my kind has a different word for it, we call it madness. The Defiance lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds against the Krillian squadron. In that time it managed to destroy 2 enemy fighters and damage a 3rd before finally succumbing to overwhelming firepower. The explosion was visible from 3 light minutes away, but those 4 minutes and 37 seconds were enough. The remaining convoy vessels managed to scatter into the asteroid field where the larger Krillian ships could not easily follow. Most of them. The Last Hope took a direct hit to its port engine array just as it was attempting to duck behind a particularly large asteroid. The blast sent it spinning helplessly, venting atmosphere and debris before it finally crashed into a smaller rock formation with enough force to crack its hull in 17 places. This is where things became interesting. Standard Krillian doctrine dictated that they should have finished off the crippled vessel immediately. A quick plasma torpedo, a brief flash of light, and another chapter in humanity's extinction would have been written. Instead, they deployed boarding shuttles. I still do not understand this decision. Perhaps they wanted prisoners for interrogation. Perhaps they wanted to loot whatever supplies remained aboard. Perhaps they were simply bored and wanted to engage in some recreational slaughter. Whatever their motivation, 12 Krillian shock troopers breached the Last Hope's hull and began methodically working their way through the ship, sector by sector, deck by deck. This should have been the end of the story. 12 heavily armed, professionally trained soldiers against a ship full of refugees, mostly children and elderly civilians, with perhaps a handful of off-duty military personnel who had been lucky enough to survive the initial attack. The mathematics were simple. The outcome was inevitable. Except humans do not seem to understand mathematics. The first trooper died in the medical bay, where Dr. Elena Vasquez had apparently decided that her surgical instruments could serve double duty as weapons. The second and third died in the engineering section, where Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb had turned the ship's own power conduits into improvised electrocution traps. But it was in the cargo bay that things became truly educational. This is where the families had been sheltering during the attack. Approximately 60 people, including 23 children, huddled together in the largest open space available while the ship shook itself apart around them. When the Krillian troopers breached the cargo bay doors, they expected to find cowering civilians ready for slaughter. Instead, they found Maya Chen, all 4 feet and 32 pounds of her, standing between the soldiers and the other children, holding what appeared to be a piece of broken metal pipe that was nearly as tall as she was. The lead trooper actually laughed. I heard it through the ship's intercom system, which my vessel had tapped into for observational purposes. A deep rumbling sound that the Krillian vocal apparatus produces when they encounter something they find amusing. Little human spawn, the trooper said in their guttural language. You would challenge us. Maya tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question seriously. Then she smiled. My great-great-great-grandmother was Elena Vasquez Chen, she said in perfect, unaccented Krillian. She fought in the first colony wars. My great-great-grandfather was Marcus Chen Webb. He held the line at Proxima Station for 6 days against impossible odds. The Krillian troopers stopped laughing. My great-grandmother was Admiral Sarah Chen Torres. She commanded the fleet that broke the siege of New Geneva. My grandmother was General Lisa Chen Lu. She led the defense of Earth during the Dark Year. Maya shifted her grip on the metal pipe, and I noticed for the first time that it was not just a random piece of debris. It was sharpened to a point, weighted at one end, and wrapped with what appeared to be strips of fabric to improve grip. My mother was Colonel Diana Chen Martinez, the child continued, her voice never wavering, never showing fear. She died at the Battle of the Outer Rim, taking 3 Krillian battlecruisers with her when she rammed her ship into their formation. The cargo bay had gone completely silent except for the sound of the ship's damaged life support system struggling to maintain atmosphere. You want to know what my name is? Maya asked, and now there was something in her voice that made even my own biorhythms spike with involuntary alarm responses. My full name is Maya Elena Marcus Sarah Lisa Deanna Chen. I carry the blood of 5 generations of human warriors. I am 6 years old. I weigh 32 pounds, and I am the most dangerous thing on this ship. She raised the improvised spear, and suddenly every adult in the cargo bay was moving. Not running away. Not seeking shelter. Moving forward. The elderly man with the broken arm grabbed a piece of twisted metal and positioned himself beside Maya. The pregnant woman who had been crying moments before picked up a shard of broken ceramic and moved to her other side. The teenage boy with burns covering half his face found a length of cable and began wrapping it around his hands. Within seconds, 60 humans had formed a rough semicircle behind this 6-year-old child, each one armed with whatever makeshift weapon they could find, each one ready to die before they would let the Krillians pass. The lead trooper raised his plasma rifle. You think this changes anything, little warrior? You think your bloodline makes you special? You are still just soft meat facing superior firepower. Maya nodded thoughtfully. You know what, she said. You are absolutely right. We are outgunned, outnumbered, and completely screwed. She grinned again, and I realized why that expression had seemed so unsettling when I first saw it. It was not the grin of a child at all. It was the grin of a predator. But here is the thing about humans, Maya continued, hefting her improvised weapon. We have been outgunned, outnumbered, and completely screwed for our entire existence. We evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us every single day. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other before we ever left our home world. We have been conquered, enslaved, bombed, gassed, and genocided more times than any species has a right to survive. She took a step forward, and the 60 humans behind her moved as one. And we are still here. The Krillian trooper squeezed the trigger of his plasma rifle. Nothing happened. He looked down at his weapon in confusion, then tried again. Still nothing. "Oh," Maya said, conversationally. "Did I forget to mention? Chief Petty Officer Webb did not just booby-trap the engineering section. He also rigged the ship's electromagnetic field generators to pulse every 30 seconds. Your fancy energy weapons. They work great right up until the moment they do not." The trooper cursed in his native language and reached for the combat knife at his belt. Maya was already moving. What happened next defied every assumption my kind had made about human physiology, human psychology, and human tactical doctrine. This child, this 6-year-old refugee, who should have been cowering in terror, launched herself at a combat-trained alien soldier who outweighed her by a factor of 8 and stood nearly 3 times her height. She should have died instantly. Instead, she drove her improvised spear directly through the gap between the trooper's chest armor and his helmet, finding what I later learned was the exact equivalent of a human's carotid artery. Purple blood fountained across the cargo bay as the soldier toppled backward, and Maya was already rolling away from his falling body, coming up with his combat knife in her tiny hands. The remaining 8 troopers charged. They lasted approximately 45 seconds. I am still not entirely certain how 60 untrained civilians, led by a 6-year-old child, managed to overwhelm 8 professional soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. My analysis subroutines have been running continuous calculations for weeks now, and the mathematics simply do not support what I witnessed. But mathematics, it seems, are not terribly relevant when dealing with humans. When the fighting ended, Maya was sitting cross-legged in the center of the cargo bay, methodically cleaning alien blood from her weapons while the adults dealt with the bodies. She looked up when she noticed me observing through the ship's sensor array, and for a moment our eyes met across the vast emptiness of space. She waved. A 6-year-old human child, covered in the blood of her enemies, sitting in the wreckage of a dying ship in the middle of nowhere, waved at me like we were neighbors meeting over a garden fence. That was when I realized that everything my people had assumed about this species was wrong. We had classified them as primitive because their technology lagged behind our own. We had dismissed them as weak because their individual physical capabilities were unremarkable. We had written them off as doomed because they were facing impossible odds against a superior enemy. But we had failed to account for the one variable that our models could not quantify. We had failed to account for what they themselves called the human spirit. I broke protocol that day. Instead of maintaining observational distance, I brought my scout vessel alongside the Last Hope and used our tractor beam to stabilize their drift. Instead of filing a standard extinction report, I transmitted a priority message to the Velithian High Council requesting immediate intervention in this conflict. And instead of treating these beings as subjects for academic study, I began to consider them as something else entirely. Allies. The rescue operation took 6 hours. During that time, I had the opportunity to speak directly with several of the survivors, including Maya herself. Her first question was not about rescue or medical aid or even the fate of the other ships in her convoy. Her first question was whether my people had any information about Krillian fleet movements in the sector. When I asked why she wanted to know, she gave me that predator's grin again. Because, she said, someone needs to pay for what they did to Captain Torres and the Defiance. And I have a pretty good idea how to make that happen. I should have realized then that the human war against the Krillian Empire was far from over. I should have realized that these refugees were not running from the fight. They were looking for a better place to make their stand. And I should have realized that little Maya Chen, with her ancient bloodline and her improvised weapons and her complete inability to understand the meaning of surrender, was not the last survivor of a dying species. She was the first soldier of humanity's counterattack. But all of that would come later. For now, I watched as the smallest human I had ever encountered stood in the wreckage of her ship, surrounded by the bodies of her enemies, and began making plans for a war that everyone else had already declared lost. The Krillians had wanted to crush the human spirit. Instead, they had just given it a very sharp point and taught it exactly where to strike. This, I was beginning to understand, had been a tactical error of considerable magnitude. The evacuation proceeded smoothly, with one small exception. When it came time to transfer Maya to our medical bay for treatment of her injuries, she politely declined. "Thank you," she said, "but I need to stay with my people. We have work to do." When I asked what kind of work, she gestured toward the improvised weapons scattered around the cargo bay. "The Krillians think this was their victory," she said. "They think they have broken us, scattered us, made us weak." She picked up her blood-stained spear and examined its point with professional interest. "Someone should probably explain to them how wrong they are." And that, my fellow Valethians, was how I learned that the most dangerous weapon in the known galaxy is not a plasma cannon or a quantum torpedo or a stellar-class destructor beam. It is a human child who has decided that someone needs to pay for making her angry. The Krillian Empire would learn this lesson soon enough. Whether they survived the education, well, that remained to be seen. 3 days after the rescue, Maya Chen walked into my observation chamber carrying a datapad, a cup of what humans call coffee, and a plan that should have been impossible. She was also wearing my spare uniform shirt, which hung on her like a tent and made her look even smaller than she actually was. The sight should have been endearing. Instead, it was terrifying. "Good morning, Zephnol," she said, settling cross-legged on the floor beside my workstation. "I have been thinking about your people's military capabilities." This was not how I had expected to start my day. I had assumed she would want to discuss medical treatment for her fellow refugees, or perhaps arrangements for long-term settlement on one of the outer colony worlds. Something appropriate for a child. "That is an unusual topic of interest," I replied carefully. Maya took a sip of her coffee and made a face. Apparently human taste buds required some adjustment to Valethian food synthesizers. "Your ships use quantum phase shields, correct? And your primary weapons are focused plasma arrays with a maximum effective range of roughly 40,000 kilometers?" I stared at her. Those specifications were classified military intelligence available only to senior fleet commanders and defense analysts. "Where did you learn that information?" She gestured vaguely toward the datapad. "I've been reading your ship's computer files. Do not worry. I did not break any encryption or violate your security protocols. I just asked nicely." "You asked nicely? Your ship's AI is very polite. Her name is Harmony 7, and she was happy to answer my questions once I explained what I needed. We had a lovely conversation about tactical theory and defensive capabilities. I felt what humans would probably call a headache coming on. "Maya, those files are restricted. They contain sensitive military data that could compromise our entire fleet if they fell into enemy hands." "Oh, I know," she said cheerfully. "That is why I'm not sharing them with the Krillians. I am sharing them with you." She activated the datapad, and a three-dimensional hologram appeared above its surface. It showed the local star system, complete with orbital mechanics, gravitational fields, and current positions of all known vessels, including a very large number of red dots that had not been there yesterday. "The Krillian Third Fleet arrived in system approximately 6 hours ago," Maya continued conversationally. 47 ships total, including 3 heavy battlecruisers, 12 destroyers, and 32 fighter squadrons. They are currently establishing a blockade pattern around the 4th planet, where they believe the remainder of our convoy is hiding. I studied the hologram with growing alarm. The Krillian force was massive, easily capable of destroying anything in this system, including my own vessel. "How did you acquire this intelligence?" "I asked your AI to scan for incoming ships. She found them hiding behind the gas giant's radiation shadow, running silent and dark. Very sneaky of them, really." Maya zoomed in on the red dots, and the display resolved into individual ship configurations. "Here is the interesting part," she continued. "They are not just hunting refugees anymore. According to the comm traffic that Harmony 7 intercepted, they have been ordered to eliminate all witnesses to their previous operations in this sector." "Witnesses?" "Us," Maya said simply. "Your people, my people. Anyone who might carry information about Krillian military capabilities back to the wider galaxy. The Empire has decided that this entire system needs to be cleaned." The headache was getting worse. Maya, if what you are saying is accurate, then we need to evacuate immediately. My ship is fast, but it cannot outfight an entire battle fleet. She nodded gravely. You are absolutely right. Running would be the sensible thing to do. Good. I will inform my crew to prepare for emergency departure. Except, Maya said, and I could hear the predator grin in her voice even though she was not looking at me. Running away would not save the other 14 ships from our convoy. The ones that are still out there, still hiding, still trying to find a way home. I turned to stare at her. She was 6 years old. She was supposed to be thinking about toys and games and whatever it is that normal children occupy themselves with. Instead, she was calculating military probabilities like a seasoned fleet commander. Maya, I understand your desire to help your people, but the mathematics are insurmountable. Even if we could locate the other refugee ships, we cannot possibly stand against a force of that magnitude. You are right, she agreed. We cannot. She tapped another control on the datapad, and the display shifted to show a detailed analysis of Krillian fleet formations and tactical doctrine. But we do not need to fight them, she said. We just need to make them fight each other. The next 30 minutes were simultaneously the most fascinating and most disturbing of my professional career. This human child, who should have been recovering from trauma and grieving for her losses, instead proceeded to outline a battle plan that was equal parts brilliant and insane. The core concept was deceptively simple. The Krillian fleet was large and powerful, but it was also spread out across multiple vector approaches to maintain their blockade. Their communication protocols relied on quantum entanglement arrays that could be disrupted by specific electromagnetic frequencies. Frequencies that my ship's sensor array could generate. If we can isolate individual squadrons and feed them false information about human fleet movements, Maya explained, we can convince different Krillian units that they are under attack by forces that do not actually exist. You want to trick them into fighting phantom enemies? Better than that, she said. And now she was definitely grinning. I want to trick them into fighting each other. The plan was audacious, risky, and probably suicidal. It required precise timing, flawless execution, and a level of coordination that would challenge even experienced military units. It was also, I realized with growing horror, probably going to work. There is one small problem, I pointed out. Even if we can disrupt their communications and create confusion within their ranks, they will eventually realize what is happening and adapt their tactics accordingly. True, Maya admitted, which is why we need to hit them hard and fast before they figure out the trick. Hit them with what? My ship has defensive weapons only. We are scientists, not warriors. Maya's grin widened. Who said anything about your ship? The answer to that question came 8 hours later, when Captain Reeves of the human destroyer Retribution contacted us via tight beam transmission. This is Captain Jack Reeves to Velithian vessel. We understand you have some of our people aboard? I looked at Maya, who was somehow managing to look completely innocent while simultaneously radiating smug satisfaction. How many ships? I asked her quietly. 7, she replied. 3 destroyers, 2 frigates, and 2 armed transports. Oh, and about 40 fighter craft that managed to escape from the Defiance before it was destroyed. And you contacted them how, exactly? I asked Harmony 7 to send out a coded distress signal using human encryption protocols. The message basically said, little girl with big ideas needs backup for a really stupid plan that might actually work. Captain Reeves' voice crackled through the comm system again. Velithian vessel, we are prepared to follow the tactical plan that Maya transmitted to us. Are your people willing to assist? I found myself in the unprecedented position of having to decide whether to commit my ship and crew to what was essentially a pirate raid conceived by a 6-year-old human. The rational response would have been to decline politely, evacuate the refugees to a safe location, and file a detailed report with the Velithian High Council about the impending destruction of this system. Instead, I heard myself saying, "This is Commander Zeph. We are prepared to assist. What do you need from us?" "Just your sensor array and your AI's hacking capabilities," Maya said before Captain Reeves could respond. "Oh, and I need to borrow your shuttle bay for about an hour." "What for?" "I need to modify some of your emergency supply drones for a special delivery mission." The next hour taught me that humans possess an almost supernatural ability to turn everyday objects into instruments of warfare. Using nothing but standard medical supplies, emergency rations, and basic electronic components, Maya and her fellow refugees converted 12 supply drones into what she cheerfully described as party favors. When I asked what kind of party required explosive devices, she just laughed. The kind where the guests do not know they are invited until it is too late to leave. The attack began at 0347 local time, when the Krillian fleet was at its most extended formation. Their ships were spread across a volume of space roughly the size of a small moon, with individual squadrons maintaining patrol patterns that kept them isolated from direct mutual support. It was, Maya pointed out with professional appreciation, a textbook example of how not to deploy a blockade force. They are thinking like conquerors instead of soldiers, she explained as we watched the enemy positions on our tactical display. They expect everyone to run from them, so they have optimized their formation for pursuit and interception rather than defense. The first phase of the operation involved my ship using its advanced sensor array to map the exact position and movement patterns of every Krillian vessel. This information was then transmitted to the human ships, which began moving into attack positions using microjumps and gravitational slingshot maneuvers to avoid detection. The second phase was where things got interesting. Using Harmony 7's computational power and Maya's understanding of Krillian communication protocols, we began transmitting false sensor data directly into their quantum entanglement network. To the Krillian fleet commanders, it appeared that massive human reinforcements were arriving in system from multiple directions simultaneously. The beauty of the deception was its simplicity. We did not try to create detailed false signatures or complex phantom fleets. Instead, we just fed them fragmentary data that suggested something big was happening in sectors where their sensors were blocked by natural phenomena. A brief energy spike behind the asteroid field. Gravitational anomalies consistent with large ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Communication bursts using human encryption codes from regions where they could not see clearly. Within 30 minutes, the Krillian fleet was in full alert status, with individual squadrons racing toward threat vectors that existed only in their own confused communications network. Phase 3, Maya announced, settling into the observer seat beside my command station. This is where it gets fun, apparently, was a relative term. The human ships struck with surgical precision, targeting isolated Krillian squadrons that had broken formation to investigate phantom threats. The destroyer Retribution materialized out of the asteroid field and engaged a trio of enemy frigates at point-blank range. The frigate Defiant Spirit used the gravity well of a small moon to slingshot directly into the middle of a fighter squadron. But the real masterpiece was what Captain Maria Santos accomplished with the armed transport New Dawn. Using the modified supply drones as decoys, she convinced an entire Krillian battle group that they were under attack by human stealth fighters. The enemy ships opened fire on the drones, revealing their positions and engaging targets that could not possibly fight back. While they were busy shooting at empty space, the New Dawn dropped its entire cargo bay full of mining charges directly into their formation and then jumped to safety. The resulting explosion was visible from 3-star systems away. You know, Maya said conversationally as we watched Krillian ships fleeing in disorder from an enemy they could not see or understand, I think they are starting to figure out that something is wrong. She was right. The surviving Krillian commanders were already adapting their tactics, consolidating their forces, and establishing new communication protocols that would be harder to disrupt. But by then, it was too late. Phase 4 of Maya's plan did not involve deception or trickery or phantom fleets. It involved the sudden arrival of 63 additional human ships that had been hiding in the outer system, waiting for exactly this moment. Ships that had been presumed destroyed in previous battles. Ships that had been written off as lost in the chaos of humanity's retreat. Ships that had been playing dead for weeks, gathering intelligence and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back. Surprise, Maya said as the tactical display lit up with friendly green contacts moving in perfect coordination against the confused and scattered Krillian forces. The battle that followed was not the desperate last stand that everyone had expected. It was a slaughter. The Krillian Third Fleet, caught completely off guard and spread across too wide an area to provide mutual support, was systematically destroyed piece by piece. Their superior numbers and advanced technology meant nothing when they could not coordinate their defense or even identify where the attacks were coming from. Within 4 hours, 31 Krillian ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and emergency beacons. The 16 survivors fled the system in complete disorder, broadcasting frantic warnings about human ghost fleets and impossible tactics. When the shooting stopped, Maya was curled up in her chair, fast asleep. I watched her for a long time, trying to reconcile the peaceful expression on her small face with the tactical genius that had just orchestrated the destruction of an entire enemy fleet. "Commander Zeph Null," Captain Reeves' voice came through the comm system. "My compliments to your strategic advisor. That was the most beautiful piece of tactical planning I have seen in 20 years of military service." I looked down at the sleeping child. "I will pass along your comments when she wakes up." "Good. Oh, and Commander, you might want to know that we just received a priority transmission from Earth Command. Seems that our little demonstration here has gotten some attention from the folks back home." "What kind of attention?" "The kind that involves promoting a 6-year-old to honorary admiral of the fleet and asking her if she would be interested in planning our next offensive operation." I stared at Maya, who chose that moment to open her eyes and smile at me. "Hello, Zeph Null," she said sleepily. "Did we win?" "Yes, Maya, you won." She nodded as if this had never been in doubt. "Good. Now we can start the real war." And that, my fellow Valethians, was when I realized that everything we thought we knew about human military doctrine was not just wrong. It was laughably, catastrophically, dangerously wrong. The humans had not been retreating. They had been regrouping. They had not been defeated. They had been learning. And they had not been running from the Krillians. They had been teaching them to run from humanity. The real war, as Maya had promised, was about to begin. 6 weeks after the Battle of Tanhirzer Gate, as the humans had started calling it, Maya Chen stood in the command center of the human flagship Eternal Vengeance and calmly ordered the complete annihilation of the Krillian homeworld. I should probably explain how we got there. The victory at Tannhauser had been just the beginning. Within days of the battle, human ships began appearing throughout the sector like ghosts materializing from the void. Ships that military intelligence had listed as destroyed months ago, entire fleets that had supposedly been wiped out during the fall of the outer colonies. They had all been hiding, waiting, watching, and learning. "The thing about humans," Maya explained to me during one of our tactical briefings, "is that we are really, really good at pretending to be dead." She was sitting in what had once been my observation chamber, but which now served as her personal strategy room aboard my vessel. The walls were covered with star charts, tactical displays, and something she called her revenge list, a comprehensive catalog of every Krillian military unit that had participated in the destruction of human colonies. "Take my grandmother, General Lisa Chen Liu," she continued, manipulating a holographic display that showed troop movements across 17 star systems. "Everyone thought she died defending Earth during the Dark Year. The Krillians certainly believed it. They even broadcast footage of her ship exploding during the final battle. But she survived?" Maya grinned that predator smile I had come to know and fear. "Oh. She died all right, but not before she uploaded her complete tactical database, including detailed intelligence on Krillian fleet movements, communication protocols, and strategic vulnerabilities, to every surviving human ship in the sector. She tapped another control and the display shifted to show the current disposition of Krillian forces throughout their empire. Every battle we lost, every colony they destroyed, every ship they thought they had eliminated, we were recording everything, learning their patterns, studying their weaknesses, building a database of information that would let us hit them where it would hurt the most. And you have been coordinating this intelligence-gathering operation?" "Me?" Maya laughed. "No, I am just the current generation. This has been going on for much longer than 6 weeks." She gestured toward the revenge list, and I realized for the first time that it was not just a tactical document. It was a family tree. Elena Vasquez Chen, my great-great-great-grandmother, started this during the First Colony Wars. Every generation since then has added to it. Names, ship configurations, tactical preferences, psychological profiles of individual commanders. We have been building a complete picture of our enemies for over a century. The scope of what she was describing was staggering. A multi-generational intelligence operation spanning decades of warfare, with each new conflict adding more data to humanity's understanding of their enemies. My mother, Colonel Diana Chen Martinez, was not just fighting the Battle of the Outer Rim when she died, Maya continued quietly. She was transmitting real-time tactical data about Krillian battlecruiser vulnerabilities to every human ship within communication range. Her sacrifice was not just about buying time for others to escape. It was about making sure that when we finally struck back, we would know exactly how to kill them. I stared at this 6-year-old child who spoke of death and revenge with the calm professionalism of a seasoned military analyst. Maya, what you are describing is not just warfare. It is a campaign of systematic extermination. Yes, she said simply. It is. That level of coordinated violence, it goes against everything my people believe about civilized conduct. Maya turned to look at me directly, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that was far older than her 6 years. Zifnul, do you know what my name means? My full name? I assume it carries some cultural significance. Maya Marcus. Sarah Lisa Diana Chen, she recited slowly. Each part represents a specific promise. Elena, to remember the first who fought. Marcus, to hold the line no matter the cost. Sarah, to lead when others cannot. Lisa, to defend what matters most. Diana, to sacrifice for the greater good. She stood up and walked to the main display, where the tactical situation showed human forces moving into position throughout Krillian space. And Chen, that is the oldest part of the name. It comes from the ancient language of Earth before humans ever left their home world. It means morning or dawn, the beginning of a new day. A poetic sentiment. Not poetic, Maya corrected. Practical. Because every time the Krillians thought they had destroyed us, every time they believed they had won, they were actually just creating the conditions for their own dawn of reckoning. The comm system crackled to life, interrupting our conversation. This is Admiral Torres on the eternal vengeance to all fleet units. Phase 7 is now in effect. Repeat, Phase 7 is authorized. All ships proceed to final attack positions. Maya smiled and activated her personal communicator. This is Strategic Advisor Chen. I concur with Admiral Torres. Begin Phase 7 operations immediately. Strategic Advisor? I asked. My official title in the Human Defense Force. They decided that Honorary Admiral was too confusing for a 6-year-old, so they created a new rank just for me. The next 12 hours taught me that human warfare is not just about tactics or technology or superior firepower. It is about patience, planning, and the kind of ruthless long-term thinking that most species simply cannot sustain across multiple generations. Phase 7 was not a battle. It was the systematic execution of a plan that had been decades in the making. Human ships appeared simultaneously in 43 different Krillian systems, striking at carefully selected targets with surgical precision. Not military installations or fleet bases, which would have been obvious targets, but infrastructure, communication relays, supply depots, maintenance facilities, and fuel refineries. Within 6 hours, the Krillian Empire had been effectively cut in half, with their remaining forces isolated in pockets that could not communicate with each other or coordinate their defense. How? I asked Maya, as we watched the tactical reports flooding in from across Krillian space. Simple, she replied. We have been mapping their supply lines for 70 years. Every convoy route, every depot, every maintenance schedule. When you know exactly how an empire feeds itself, killing it becomes a matter of basic biology. The Krillian response was predictable. Their remaining fleets converged on what they assumed were the most valuable human targets, expecting to find heavily defended worlds that they could besiege or destroy. Instead, they found empty space and automated distress beacons broadcasting continuous loops of human children singing lullabies. Psychological warfare, Maya explained when I asked about this particular detail. Nothing terrifies a professional soldier quite like the sound of the enemy having fun at their expense. The real human forces were elsewhere, systematically hunting down isolated Krillian units and destroying them with overwhelming local superiority. It was not glorious combat or heroic last stands. It was efficient, methodical, and utterly merciless. By the time the Krillian High Command realized what was happening, it was far too late to mount any effective response. Their empire was collapsing from within, their fleets were scattered and leaderless, and their enemies had achieved something that should have been impossible. Total strategic surprise on a galactic scale. "This is Admiral Torres to all human forces," came the announcement that changed everything. "Krillian High Command has broadcast a general surrender. Repeat, the Krillian Empire has officially surrendered unconditionally." I expected cheering celebration, perhaps some acknowledgement of the magnitude of what had just been accomplished. Instead, Maya quietly activated her communicator. "This is Strategic Advisor Chen to Admiral Torres. Surrender not accepted. Continue with Phase 8 operations." "Maya," I said carefully, "the war is over. They have surrendered." She turned to look at me with those ancient eyes in her child's face. "No, Zephano. The war was over the moment they decided to exterminate my species. What we are doing now is not war. It is justice." Phase 8 was the complete dismantling of Krillian civilization. Not just their military forces, but their entire social and political structure. Their colony worlds were liberated and placed under human administration. Their industrial capacity was seized and converted to humanitarian aid production. Their leadership was arrested and tried for crimes against sentient life. It was conquest. On a scale that my people had never imagined possible. An entire galactic empire, brought to its knees by what we had initially dismissed as a primitive species facing inevitable extinction. But the most shocking revelation came when Maya finally explained the true meaning behind her family name and the title of the oldest name in their ruins. "The Chen bloodline goes back much further than the first colony wars," she told me as we watched the final Krillian stronghold surrender. "Much, much further." She activated a new display, one that showed not star charts or tactical information but archaeological data, ancient ruins on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy, all bearing the same linguistic markers. "My family has been fighting this war for over 3,000 years, Zephano. Long before humans had faster-than-light travel, long before we even knew other species existed. The Chen line was preparing for this moment. The implications were staggering." "You are saying that humans were planning this conflict before you ever encountered the Krillians?" "Not planning," Maya corrected. "Preparing. The ruins you see in those images? They are not Krillian constructions. They are human, built by my ancestors during the first expansion from Earth, millennia ago." She manipulated the display to show detailed architectural comparisons. "We spread across the galaxy once before, Zephno. We built cities, established colonies, created a civilization that spanned hundreds of worlds, and then something destroyed it all, drove us back to our single home world and left us to start over from almost nothing. The Krillians? No, something else. Something worse." But the Chen family remembered. "We kept the old records, the old maps, the old warnings. We knew that someday the destroyers would return, and when they did, humanity would need to be ready." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "The Krillians were not your real enemy. They were practice." Maya nodded solemnly. "The Krillian Empire was just the first test. A way to prove that humans could actually implement the strategies our ancestors developed during the first expansion. A way to show that we had learned from our previous defeat." She gestured toward the tactical displays showing the complete collapse of Krillian resistance. "And now that we have passed the test, now that we know our methods work on a galactic scale, it is time to prepare for the real war." "Against what?" Maya smiled, but this time it was not the predator grin I had come to expect. This time it was the smile of a child who had just accomplished something she was genuinely proud of. "Against the things that destroyed human civilization the first time, the things that are still out there, still watching, still waiting for the right moment to finish what they started." She turned back to the display showing the ancient ruins. "My name is Maya Chen, and I am both the youngest survivor of humanity's second expansion and the oldest guardian of our first. I carry the memories of 3,000 years of preparation, the tactical knowledge of 5 generations of warriors, and the promise that this time when the real destroyers come, we will be ready for them." The common system activated one final time. "This is Admiral Torres, to Strategic Advisor Chen. All Krillian forces have been neutralized. The sector is secure. What are your orders for Phase 9? Maya looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether to trust me with what came next. Phase 9 begins immediately, she said finally. Begin construction of the Deep Defense Network. Alert all human colonies to initiate Protocol Omega preparations, and send a message to the Valathian High Council. What message? I asked. Tell them that humanity formally requests membership in the Galactic Defense Alliance. Explain that we have successfully field-tested our military capabilities against a hostile empire and are now prepared to share our tactical knowledge with allied species. She paused. And tell them that the real enemy is coming. The enemy that destroyed us before. The enemy that will try to destroy us all. How long do we have? Maya consulted a datapad that I realized contained information far older than anything in our combined databases. According to the ancient records, the Devourers return every 4,000 years to harvest advanced civilizations. The last cycle was approximately 3,700 years ago. 300 years, I whispered. Give or take a decade, Maya confirmed. Which gives us just enough time to turn this galaxy into the kind of fortress that will make them regret coming back. And that, my fellow Valathians, is how I learned that the human war against the Krillian Empire was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything. The little girl covered in alien blood who waved at me from a dying refugee ship was not just a survivor of humanity's latest conflict. She was the advance scout of their next one. And if the ancient records she carries are accurate, if the warnings passed down through 3,000 years of preparation prove true, then what we witnessed in this sector was not human vengeance. It was human practice. The real war. The war that humanity has been preparing for since before my species ever learned to look at the stars, is still to come. But when it arrives, when the Devourers return to finish their harvest, they will find something waiting for them that they have never encountered before. They will find a galaxy full of species who have learned to fight like humans. And they will find Maya Chen no longer the youngest refugee in a dying ship, but the oldest guardian of an ancient promise. The promise that this time, when the darkness comes, the dawn will be ready, the morning will fight back, and the children of Earth will not go quietly into that endless night. Not again. Never again.